The power of a different mind. So, a lot of times, many of us, for years, we probably think that something is legitimately wrong with us, right? The way we process information, how we manage our time, and probably how we connect with others probably doesn't feel very easy, right? It doesn't come very easy, like you would say, to navigate in the spaces that you find yourself in or the environments that you find yourself in, right? Sometimes you struggle even with the simplest task that other people consider to be simple. And so it took a while for me to understand exactly what was going on, right? So I went on a self discovery essentially to find out the truth about why my brain functions the way that it does. Part of that journey actually took me into my undergraduate studies in social psychology. And because I wanted to understand why did I think different than others, or why did my mind or my brain function differently? And so that brought me on a path of discovery to find out exactly who I am and how my brain worked and how my mind functioned, right? So I'm going to talk to you guys today about neurodiversity. You guys, this may be like a buzzword in the 20th century, right? And so a lot of times when we hear these different buzzwords, we don't really quite understand exactly what it means. And so for me, that single word in recent history or recent years is what really reframed my entire existence, right? And so because we're neurodiverse, we think that now that we are considered different because we think different, that we're broken. And so that's not exactly what that means, right? It means that we think differently because our brain is wired differently. We have a whole new architecture that is unique to us, right? We process the world differently. We have a different perspective. We have different lenses. And so neurodiversity recognizes that, right? It's the neurological differences that are natural variations of the human experience. So we're not all cookie cutter, we're not cut from the same cloth, essentially, right? So there's not really a deficit that needs to be fixed, but we just need to be understood and valued. And sometimes that's what's missing from the neurodiverse community. And so as we all know, there's not one normal brain, right? If you put air quotes to that, because everyone functions differently. We struggle with different things. We have different challenges, right? Some of us have ADHD, right? That the hyper focus capabilities, essentially, right? Like maybe, or maybe it's the deficit portion of it where we become divergent when we're not able to focus, or we're hyper focused on one specific thing that we're not able to accomplish things that like our goals, right? Or missions, the things that drive us, right? And then there's the different spectrums as well, right? So you have deep pattern recognition. Like you will find that for people who are autistic, right? Who have autism, they're on the spectrum. They recognize things differently. They have different patterns, right? So they discover things different than we do. They communicate differently. They have different styles, right? People with dyslexia, they will switch words or letters around, right? Or numbers. So people may recognize the number 21 as 12, right? Because there's things that they miss in the visual information or the visual cues that are sent to them as signals, essentially, right? And there's so many different neurodivergent properties, right? But the neurodiverse paradigm celebrates this cognitive diversity. I know we don't use that term diversity much anymore because of current geopolitical um, um, constructs, if you would, right? But this is a way for us to still be able to recognize that look, we are all different, right? There is cognitive diversity that exists, and it is natural, and so we have to be able to embrace that, not only just in our quote unquote normal communities, but in the neurodivergent communities as well. And so sometimes this is how we feel, right? Like, man, this world is not built for us, right? Why? Because we navigate differently, right? Or the way we think, right? We look at fluorescent lights that overwhelm, open offices that scatter focus, right? So sometimes for me, and I know I'm the type of person, right? You may see right now, I'm actually recording this in my office and I am in a box, essentially, right? Like everything is closed. I'm wearing these these headphones, and I'm speaking with a microphone that I can hear myself, because this actually keeps me focused, right? It doesn't give me that scattered brain essentially, right? Because I know it's and that's how I had to really figure that out, right? So when you're in your relationships with your loved ones, this is their way to now be able to understand, like, look, there is it's not that there's something wrong with me. I need to be able to do this in order to function better, right? And so sometimes what we end up doing is we mask ourselves, right? We get into that mimicking the normal behaviors because we want to be accepted, right? But we don't really know how to, embrace the difference, and so we overcompensate, and this is what leads to burnout, right? This is the cost that comes to us mentally, because we've overcompensated. Now we have become a different person. We're not showing up as our true authentic self. And so that the cost for us is that we get anxiety, we have burnout, and we're constantly feeling like an imposter, right? As I was going through my doctoral studies, right, and I still, even saying it today, I feel like I do have imposter syndrome, because I'm like, wow, I'm actually a doctor, right? So I'm a doctor of education in organizational leadership, and sometimes I feel that imposter syndrome, because it's like, because I am neurodiverse, it feels like, well, you feel like you didn't really accomplish it, right? And sometimes that's what ends up happening, is because we use these survival systems, if you would, to put ourselves in that normal behavior category, right? Because we feel like it's something that we can't embrace. So this is why I'm saying we need to be able to embrace our differences, right? Because even if we weren't neurodiverse, everyone is different in their own special, unique way, right? And so for me, I had to really take that mask off, right? I teach even on my social media platforms, about showing up as your true authentic self. Because exactly what happens, right? We have to release that, what we call the mask, and acknowledge and accept our neurodivergent self, right? Instead of trying to hide it and trying to, get permission from everyone else, right? No, we understand how we function. We function differently, and so we're going to show up differently, and so that energy that we give in whatever environment we find ourselves in, we're actually going to be giving off that energy, and that's what's going to attract people to us, right? So we don't want to have four different characters. We want to be our true authentic self. And so what I've done is I've built custom systems, right? I know everyone is different, so when I do meet with clients, I create different workflows that actually honor, right, those attention patterns that they have, right? They're different energy cycles, they process things differently. And so understanding where they're coming from and building those systems so that way they can function and navigate in that space, it is just amazing to see the transformation that happens, right? And so that is a strength now that I've actually discovered. And so I've created LLCs and businesses from this, because I lean into what my brain does exceptionally well, right? Like pattern recognition. I like workflows. I like putting things in order. I like things to be organized. Creating solving skills, right? And that's what works for me. And so that transformation wasn't instant. It didn't happen overnight, right? But when I discovered it, because it really opened up my eyes once I started, going live on these different platforms and just discovering my who I am in my neurodiverse existence, right? And so for me, it was so important for me to build those environments that fit me instead of trying to reshape myself to fit the world, right? A lot of us find ourselves doing that. So this gives us an opportunity to show up as our true authentic self, being in that neurodiverse category, if you would. And so neurodiversity is not a flaw, right? A lot of times we think, oh, well, I'm broken, right? Because we get distracted, right? Because it's so we have to look at neurodiversity as a framework, right? Because in order for us to have innovation, we need to have differences, right? Because if we were all cookie cutter, functioning and showing up the same way, then it would be a very boring, and it would not be an opportunity for us to show up as our true creative beings, essentially, right? And so because creativity thrives on our unique perspectives, we have to be able to show up that way, because if not, we're going to do what's called groupthink, right? So that's another psychological term, is groupthink, right? Everyone shows up and they all have agree with the person that speaks the loudest in the room, right? You guys probably have, have experience with that, right? And so if in order for us to make progress in this, very chaotic world, we have to be able to progress, like with all different kinds of thinkers, right? We don't want to have a cutter system. We want to have cognitive diversity, right? So that way we can move with strategy. And so Harvey Bloom, a journalist, said neurodiversity may be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general, right? That is so profound. And so if we can start to embrace what Harvey Bloom was talking about, right, we can begin to understand why we are neurodiverse and how we actually fit into the environments that we find ourselves in, right? So the key things to walk away from this content is that you're not broken, right? This video is like you're brilliant. You're just wired differently. If we can just embrace that, right? Our brain has a unique architecture, right? It's not a bug. It's a feature. And so we have to be able to embrace that, right? Find our own communities, right? We have on social media, you could find a community for just about anything, right? I was actually on another content creators live and they were talking about the sock puppet person, right? And that's their way of being able to engage and connect with people, right? So if there's one thing that we need to walk away from from this video is that we need to be able to rewrite the narrative, right? Let's challenge ourselves. We're not the deficit model, right? Like we have to challenge ourselves that our differences actually do make a difference. We have contribution and we have value, right? So that's what I want us to walk away from this content, this video. Follow me for more clarity first conversations about neurodiversity, self acceptance. We're going to just do the whole gamut, right? And building a world that works for all different kinds of minds and all different kinds of people. Catch you in the next one.